So hi everyone, we are back. We are IMS Get Set Law, and we are back with a super interesting session of Ignite. The idea is to nurture or give you that impetus to get into the best national law universities, complete your legal education, and find out a feasible career for you. So here we are with a very interesting personality. He is Deepak Narayan, and he's a sports lawyer based out of Chennai. Now, speaking about Deepak, he has done his LLB from Ambedkar Law College in Madras, and before that, interestingly, he was a person who was pursuing his BCom or rather bachelor's in economics in Loyola University. So he did his bachelor's in economics, did his law, then went on to do his LLM from Queen Mary University, London, came back and set up his own practice. So he's currently a partner at BDN Chambers and is massively involved in sports law work. So welcome to the show, Deepak. Hope you are doing amazingly well.
Thanks for having me. Look forward to an interesting session.
So, Deepak, the first thing I would want you to speak about is so you had a very interesting background. So you did your economic honors from Loyola, and then took a transition to law. So, can you tell me what was going on in your brain when you wanted to pursue law, or when you had sort of a decision to make whether you want to pursue law or not?
Right. To be very honest, I always wanted to do law, even when I was in my school days. But of course, economics is also one of the subjects which interested me, and also one of the subjects in which I fared really well in my final
Right.
exams.
Right.
Uh, and also the fact that I was a sports person back then, so I was a competitive badminton player,
All
and
right. All right.
Loyola College is one of the universities which hugely promotes sports, and you have some sports luminaries who come out of that university.
Right.
So I also wanted to continue to play a little bit more competitively, and at the same time, I was also interested in economics. And also, to be very something that should be highlighted is that back then I graduated in 2012 law and 2009 in economics. So back then, the push towards doing a 5-year course was not as much as it was today. There were a lot more colleges back then which did have 3-year course, much less now. But of course, there are very good colleges even now which still have 3-year courses. So back then, I'll not say it doesn't matter, but it was not stressed upon so much that you need to actually go ahead and do your 5 years immediately after the 12th. So I just wanted to have a graduation experience in a non-law subject. And of course, I'm very glad that I did it, because not only you probably, I personally, I feel you get a lot more maturity after doing one graduation and then the other. But at the same time, doing something like an economics or a commerce background, it will greatly help you to have a commercial sense when probably you later in your career you practice in the commercial side of law.
And then you studied law in B.R. Ambedkar College in Madras. So how was your experience there?
It was very good. It's not one of the national law universities curriculum that you have these days. It's a lot more chilled and relaxed. It's basically a government law college, so you have lesser hours of classes, which definitely prompted me to do a lot more of extracurricular activities, since I was a little more academically inclined during my 3 years in law. So I did a lot of moot courts. I had a lot more time to do that, and I felt pretty well when compared to the previous years in college in respect to the performances. So, and I do get a lot more practical experiences, since our college uniquely is situated within the Madras High Court at that time, at least. Now I think it's shifted. We get to even work with lawyers as and when we studied. So that's another great benefit of studying in
Like
the
work or take up internships?
Right, yeah. So internships now per se are generally done in December's, May, for a period of 10, 15 days, 1 month, right? So back then, since we didn't have that many hours of college, we had the option of even working daily, like any other junior in law firm. So that's one of the great benefits of actually study, for me at least personally, of having studied there.
Amazing, amazing, superb, and I think this really helps. So for a lot of people who are interested in pursuing law litigation, especially, a lot of people have started doing this, as in they have started taking 6-7 months of internship under a lawyer just to understand how exactly it all happens in a court of law. And a lot of universities also have started giving this leverage to these students. So a lot of universities, if I'm not wrong, some Bombay universities have also started giving this leverage to these students to just join chambers, and they reduce their academic hours, especially when it comes to the fifth year. So that way they are exposed and get the practical sense of exercising law. All right. And then after doing your law from Madras University, you worked under a senior, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, it's basically a hardcore litigation law firm in Chennai. So I
Okay.
worked as a junior in their firm, which had a senior advocate and a partner. It's a small it's a firm, but still usual. They had the structure of the usual litigation firm in any other place in
Right.
India. So then we just did hardcore litigation, as in writs, appeals, suits, and stuff.
Okay.
So litigation was always a big factor for me to actually having done law, because I like to go do arguments in courts. And I
Right.
think, sure, even though now more commercial side and non-contentious side, as probably an in-house legal counsel or doing transaction side in law firms, the people, many law students, they prefer that a lot more. But I'm sure many people will still be first attracted to the field of law because they want to go make those big arguments in court. So which is the
Right.
same as well when I took up law. So
Right, exactly. Right. And then after doing your this small stint of work with a senior, you went on to do your LLM from Queen Mary University, London. So how was your experience there?
it was phenomenal, especially having done my UG or LLB from a non-national law school in India. The Queen Mary was a lot more academically inclined. Of course, again, it didn't have that many hours of classes like many other universities, but you did have to do a lot of your own self-work there, which is actually good because you're at the master's level, you're expected to do your own work rather than being spoon-fed like probably in the lower level. So you need to unless and until you study for the next day classes, you'll not be able to keep up with the rest of the class. And also
Right.
you have all these tutorials, practical experiences and stuff. And of course, studying in London itself was an amazing experience. The work culture there, I got to work, I did a very small internship after my masters at one of the leading law firms there at Clyde and Co in the international arbitration side. Then, of course, being having studied in London again paved me for another very interesting internship opportunity after that at SIAC, Singapore International Arbitration Center in Singapore. So, if not for Queen Mary, probably I would not have done that. And definitely having worked there and having seen the top tier work being done in a you call pan India law firms there. These law firms in top tier law firms in the world, they pretty much have an office across the world in all places. So having been part of that definitely opened my eyes a little more as to how much we have to do when I come back here, because I always wanted to come back to India.
Right.
So it did give a great push, or probably gave me a little more idea as to how I have to move forward after I came back.
Right. And speaking of Queen Mary University, London, how was the entry? As in, how was the admission process? Like, was it rigid? Was it difficult? Was it easy? What was it?
It's easy, as in it's not too easy, but of course you can get in.
Right.
Personally, to be very completely honest, what happened is I went to one of these education fairs, and my university in LLB is one of the low scoring universities. I mean, even the top candidates will not be given a percentage of more than 60. So my marks were completely were pretty much less when compared to other universities.
Right.
But I still was in the top percentile of the class. So when I went to the fair, they said it's going to be very difficult with your mark because we need at least 60%. I had just marginal 58, 59, I think. So I
Right.
said, what if I get a certificate that my university itself is a low scoring university, and technically I'm still in the top five or top three percentile of my class. So I'm still a good student in a university which doesn't give you a lot of marks. So I did
Okay.
get a certificate like that, and I had a good SOP with me. So that's how I got it.
Right. Right. Super. Super. So Queen Mary University, London, and that's how you finished your education. Now, guys, just for some of you who already have observed how Deepak took a transition from a normal mainstream bachelor course. He did his law, then he did his LLM. So it's really not important, but especially a lot of students keep on asking me, sir, what is going to happen to me? I've wasted 3 4 years studying a very different course, and now I want to study LLB. Should I drop my plans of studying LLB? Is it really worth doing an LLB, especially if I wasted or rather put in effort in another subject? So that is something which I strongly, oppositely believe, and I would love to have talking about it. So, what exactly do you think when I speak about you taking a transition from economics to law? What exactly sort of propelled you? You told me that you always wanted to do law initially only, but then since this thing was back in 2009, now it is changing to a 5 year law course, but still there are students who are still taking transition from normal mainstream BBA, from BCom, from normal bachelor's in economics, taking a transition to law, and still are confused.
So personally, I feel that it's a very wrong perception that people generally have, that you need to definitely do a 5 year course to show your inclination in the side of law. It's as long as you study law and you have a graduate law degree, I think it should be fine. Because like unlike many other fields where you study some subject and then enter that particular field to work, in law, even after you enter into the field of legal field, you keep on studying till the end of your life, because there are so many new judgments and legal amendments and legislations which keep coming up each and every year. So you need to keep yourself updated. So as long as you put in your hard work and you're quite diligent in your work and you're willing to put on that hours, I don't think it should be a problem. And also the fact that not just probably a commerce or economic background, which many might think is slightly more relevant to the field of law. I've seen many science graduates, engineering graduates who have actually taken up 3 year law after they do, and they've done really well. My own cousin, he also has a law firm in Chennai, and he's a science graduate. He did his BSc physics. So after that, he took up law and he's doing extremely well. And you also get a unique acumen in your respective field, right? It's not just about law. Law is just mostly a procedure, or probably in the substantive side, you just need to know the probably the relevant legislations and laws. But of course, there's always substantive, as in the core field under which probably a dispute or a deal is being done. So probably consider in the field of arbitration. Now there's a big push towards having technical arbitrators into the field of arbitration as an arbitrator. So consider you do your engineering first and you later take up law and then you want to do arbitration. So in that side, you being a technical, you can easily get yourself empaneled in a technical arbitration center, because you might have a little more edge over others. Because I personally, I did law because I don't like science or I don't like maths. Maths doesn't come to me. If you give me a very hard calculation, I might not do it correctly, even now, not before. So if you give me law, of course, I can go in and out and talk a lot about it. But definitely consider maybe someone who is with a science background or even an accounts background. They might be able to quickly grasp the relevant legal points. And I think it is a big benefit if you actually do a 3 year course. But of course, the perception now is that you have to go do a 5 year course, which I actually don't agree. I personally, when I take juniors or interns, I don't discriminate students or interns who've done 3 year or 5 year. Not just because I did my 3 years and then did 3 year law, but because it doesn't make sense to discriminate. As long as you see enough potential and the candidate is willing to work diligently and put in their hard work, and as long as they're actually interested in the relevant field, I think they should be able to do well.
Right, right. Superbly answered. Now, so since we have covered how you fared in your education, your graduation, your LLM, all of it, now we'll have to address the elephant in the room, which is sportswear and related careers. So after you did your LLM from Queen University, London, you came back and set up your own practice. Uh, Tell me how relevant sports law is when it comes to the legal diaspora. Is it really relevant? Is it gaining traction? Is it there? Is it not? All of that.
To be very honest, it's still in the very, very nascent stage. It's still picking up. Unfortunately, while the side of sports law is as such still picking up, sports field as such is in a little more, it's still far ahead. Because, of course, even without even going to law, sports is always a little sacred to us. I mean, I've seen my friends who talk about football clubs as if they are the owners of the football clubs when the players come in and come out. And of course, I don't even have to start talking about cricket. We do pujas for matches for players to win their matches, and we pelt stones in their houses if they lose a match.
Right.
My own father, he walks out in the middle of the match if India is not doing well because he gets totally irritated. And I myself, I was hugely upset and I didn't get a good night's sleep when Roger Federer lost to Djokovic in the fifth set in 2019 Wimbledon. I was not able to sleep that night. But why is that? Because sports is a little more sacred to us, and of course it's become a lot more commercial these days, especially with IPL and the fact that everything is open now. The whole world is open because of social media and the network that we have. So you have whatever you do anywhere, it's immediately broadcasted. All international matches are broadcasted everywhere, and the money that is involved in various sports field is huge. You started with the IPL, and now you have various football league, Premier League in India, the badminton Premier League that's happening, Kabaddi League that's happening, which is all faring pretty well, not bad. The India has gone from one sports nation to multi-sports nation now, pretty much. So it is also good. So the money involved is huge, and the popularity that the players get is also huge. But unfortunately, the sports law is still not robust in India. You have very, very few little sports legislation and very few people who actually practice sports law. So it is definitely quickly you need to ramp up the legislations and laws to keep up with the money or the heights in which sports is growing, especially here. So that needs to be looked upon. Even we don't even have a robust dispute resolution mechanism in India. A few years back there was a big talk. I'm not sure about the caste that since most of here are CLAT aspirants, there's something called Court of Arbitration of Sports, which is located in Switzerland, which is one of the leading sports arbitration centers. So any disputes arising anywhere, it can be referred to that particular international dispute there and it can be resolved. So there's a big push in India a few years back to have its own domestic court of arbitration of sport. And there was some big news in respect to news. Most of the newspapers covered it, but after that, it pretty much subsided. We don't even know. Actually, there is actually a center physically. We have the notification, everything in place, but it's not properly in operation now. Most of the associations have their own disciplinary committees or appeals committees which are handling the disputes. And of course, you must be very, very aware of the fact that the courts in India are extremely slow and the career of a sports person is very, very less. So consider a dispute is taken to court, maybe as an appeal or after a disciplinary committee's action in the relevant sports association to maybe a high court or a civil court. It's going to get dragged on for a few years in which the player himself might suffer or herself might suffer. So I personally do not find so much of a difference between sports law field and other legal fields. As in the law is definitely different. You need to study the law relevant to that particular field. But the way in which you approach is not so different because again you can have the contentious maybe linking a little bit of the second question with the first question. You have contentious as well as non-contentious side in any legal field you would take. So as long as it's not a dispute and probably it's in the very contractual or the transaction stage, it's non-contentious. So you need to be very, very aware of the fact, have a probably a practical insight as to what is important, what is not important when you draft a contract. You need to have a different, you call these boilerplate clauses, which usually the our client usually ignores, but lawyers give more emphasis to those clauses. Maybe all the relevant legal clauses, indemnification, the termination clauses, the dispute resolution clauses, the governing law clauses, everything is very, very important when it comes to non-contentious side. And again, transaction side as well. Even when you're negotiating probably with the other side, you need to be very, very aware as to which is a deal breaker, which clause you need to have, which clause probably can be modified a little and stuff. But of course, when it comes to the contentious side, you have various types of disputes. Probably you can categorize them into disciplinary disputes, which might probably involve a little bit of doping scandal. You have the WADA, NADA. WADA is the World Anti-Doping Agency. NADA is the National Anti-Doping Agency in India. So WADA generally prescribes all the doping guidelines and probably is more on the supervisory side. Whereas in NADA, you need to look out for where the doping scandal happens and take appropriate action against the relevant person. And even in commercial side, if you go to in respect to disputes, you have when you probably when you're drafting a contract, probably you do an endorsement agreement, you do a sponsorship agreement for a sports player, you do probably when it comes to broadcasting, you do broadcasting related agreements with the relevant broadcasting agencies. But when it comes to the contentious side, again, you need to figure out which forum that you want to move based on the contract. We are still in India, as I said, you don't have the institutional mechanism that is very robust. You still have stuck with the ad hoc mechanism, in which case you might not end up with an arbitrator who is not so well versed in the field of law, in the field of sports law. And again, it's the same with the courts as well. The courts might not have that much of a practical approach when probably dealing with sports law. So when it comes to difference between the relevant legal fields in sports law and other non-law fields, I always think, no, you need to just approach it in the same way, but you need to be very, very thorough in the relevant field, whatever you do. Not just sports law. If it's investment dispute, you need to be thorough with investment law. If it's trade dispute, you need to be thorough with the trade law. Commercial law. Construction law. So the law will probably change from each and every legal field, but of course, in the way in which you approach should be the same. You need to ensure that you have a very good contract in place first, so that there isn't much of a dispute in the end. And even if there is a dispute, your client is safeguarded. And when in fact there is a dispute, if at all there is a dispute, you need to approach it in the best way possible so that you get quick results. Because in sports, unlike other fields, you cannot wait for years and years. Consider it's a doping scandal, or you might be aware not so much of the Zinedine Zidane headbutting incident which happened in 2006 World Cup, or the Srishant match fixing, whereby the Supreme Court reversed the ban and they reduced it to 7 years. See, consider if the disciplinary committee or probably the relevant courts, they think that the relevant imposition of ban or some suspension, it's not so severe. For the courts to even decide at that particular time, at some point of time, if there is a significant delay. Consider in sports field, 20 to 30 is the peak age for a sports person. So probably if you lose 7 to 8 years there in the court, they're going to lose their entire career. So you need to be very quick in acting. And in respect to differences, I don't think there should be much of a difference. You need to approach it, but definitely you need to be very thorough. And in respect to contentious and non-contentious, I think I've covered the various contentious and non-contentious fields. I recently, in fact, I drafted a moot proposition for one of the universities where I brought in sports law, where I brought a dispute arising out of a morals clause in an endorsement agreement, which is very, very important usually when you do an endorsement agreement, because you might subscribe or you might engage a world-class player to endorse your own brand.
Right.
At the same time, if you're for the player, you need to ensure that the morals clause is not so broad. And if you're for the company, you need to ensure that the morals clause is a little more broader. Because because if the player suffers some disrepute because of his actions or some other thing, the endorsement agreement should be terminated in such a fashion. If it's for the player, it should not be too harsh. Just because there's some bad news in a Twitter feed, he should not lose his endorsement deal. And if it's for the company, they need to safeguard their own interest, because it's basically they're building their company with the image of the player. So it's very, very important that the player should also have a good image. So just to give you a practical overview as to consider, if it's a non-contentious field, these are the things that you need to keep in mind. And if there is a dispute, having this morals clause wider or broader will matter a lot, because that's where you'll actually get to know which side has a better case in the end.
Got it. So I will not be appropriate be able to say that to sum it all. But then, of course, the broad idea here is to do well in a niche career, which is sports law. You will eventually have to be a good lawyer. You will have to argue well. You will have to understand well. You will have to have that innate knowledge of law, and then probably apply it in a fashion which rather helps your client. So, speaking of application of law, speaking of your experiences when it comes to sports law, can you take us to one interesting case which you did in sports law, if that's okay for you?
As in a dispute.
Yeah, any dispute.
Okay. So I do not want to name the parties because of all the confidentiality issues, but in relation to a dispute in respect to sports associations, I recently handled a dispute where there was a big conflict in respect to two state level associations, as in who is the right state level association to conduct relevant sports tournaments for that particular sport.
Oh,
And the central sports authority, you have a state sports body and a center sports body, right? So the center sports body was not too keen to actually recognize one of the institutions, because of course there'll be a lot of politics generally involved in these associations. So they were also not correctly recognizing this association over the other. Are you able to hear me? Your screen is suddenly stuck.
uh,
You're able to hear me?
yeah, perfectly fine. Yeah.
Okay. So when it comes to the dispute between these two associations, there was a case which was filed in the High Court as to which association will have a better view, which was actually prompted by a few of the sports people in that particular sport, mainly because they were quite unsure as to which tournaments they need to play. Both the sports associations, they were conducting tournaments, and you have to go for national and international tournaments based on the ranking points, right? So you need to accumulate your ranking points, then you play nationals, and then you play international tournaments. So the first stage is state level. So you need to know which association you need to go and play, which tournament. And these associations wantedly they conducted tournaments at the same time. It was not as if this week this association, next week another association conducting two different matches. It was on the same days. So the players had to choose which tournament they need to pick. So there was a big case which went on, and in the end, there was order of the High Court with the new association which was formed. They gave a stay over their operation, and they said the old association will continue for now. At least it was a big sigh of relief for the players as such, because at least they were able to figure out which association they need to play, so
Right.
that they accumulate their respective ranking points.
I think it actually matters, and it boils down to the fact that the entire sport is getting affected because of that. So we have seen the amount of politics which cricket has, and as a result of that, how of course, it is faring rather well for us. But then the problem still persists when it comes to giving.
Especially in the administrative side, you don't have sports players, but you have probably politicians who are presidents, secretaries, and the committee members of
Right.
different sports associations. So they'll all have their own personal problems. Even businessmen who usually come into the committee of sports organizations,
Exactly.
they have
Exactly.
their own personal problems, and they cannot vent out their frustration, or they cannot look to make money in the sports field, probably at the stake or at the this thing of players, at the cost of the players, right? So of course you can make money in commercial deals, but not in such manner. So
Right. All right, guys. I would love to have a few questions. Then we'll get back to the session. So, if you have any questions, please write down quickly on the chat box. So there's a lag of 30 seconds basically. So when we speak, it takes 30 seconds for YouTube to broadcast it.
no problem.
Yeah. So Ayushi is asking, how were the work opportunities abroad after getting your LLM?
Right. So It's you have I think slightly better opportunity than others. Definitely, if you do an LLM, it also completely depends on how you approach your LLM, what you do your LLM for. Is it for you? Do you want to get some work opportunity abroad, or you just wanted to learn? I just want to learn, but still, nevertheless, I was quite keen in an LLM and was little more academically inclined than others. So I thankfully landed up a couple of internships after my LLM. And these internships are not like the ones in India. So it's not just a work experience that you do, it's more of a gateway as well as probably an insight as to how actually a lawyer works there. And there is a lot more networking that happens when you do an LLM, either during your course or during an internship. You need to network with the relevant lawyers, and later, of course, when you probably apply for a position in their law firm or the company, you will definitely have a better chance than the others. So the work opportunity for an LLM grad who did his LLM grad abroad is definitely a little more better. But of course, every not every person will actually. There are a lot of LLM graduates, a lot of students who want to do their LLM now abroad. So not everyone gets a job because it's very their work intake is also very stringent. So you need to be really good, and you need to be at the right place at the right time and do the right work.
Goes without saying. Also, there's a very interesting question. Did sir do LLM in sports law as well? So, of course, I know for a fact that you didn't do it. But then, if you can, just go ahead and elucidate on the sports law education when it comes to law, when it comes to universities abroad. So, are there any universities which give sports law LLM, or is there a? I think there's a MBA in sports law, if I'm not wrong. So
Yeah.
if you can point out, as in, if you can give us.
Actually, a lot of universities they do sports law. So you can actually, it's unlike India, you will have the option when you do an LLM abroad to probably choose from 100 different modules. So if you're really interested in the field of sports, you can of course choose sports law as a field, and you will be quite. The teaching there will also be very on topic, and it'll ensure that you're probably an expert in the field of sports after you do it. And when it comes to MBA, I think there's a sports management field. And definitely, if you're probably not completely law related, it's a little more on the management side. But of course, you can actually also think about doing a little bit of management and then law as well. This might also help you, or probably a law graduate can do a sports law management, because there is a lot of overlap between management and law in respect to sports. So it's a good field as well. You can think about it.
Right, right. Uh, all right. Somebody is asking, how long is the LLM? So, of course, when it comes to abroad, it's 1 year, guys. India recently, the Bar Council of India has rather prolonged the LLM process from 1 year to 2 years. But abroad, it's invariably 1 year. Okay, Tanisha is asking, the laws of two countries are different. So, how do you work with that?
So if you want to practice domestically in one country, probably if you consider you want to be a sports lawyer in India doing domestic disputes, you need to be quite aware of the domestic laws here. Of course, if you want to practice sports law in some other country, you need to be aware of their relevant law. Of course, if it's international law, it's a little more common. You can there is a big international sports law is one of the fields. So you can actually just like how I said about morals clause, it's quite similar to wherever you do. So you need to have the morals clause and probably in the same way wherever you practice law. So
Right.
of course the relevant legislations will be different for each country. So it will matter. So if it's international, it doesn't matter. You will have to look into which is the governing law of the contract and probably be aware of the relevant domestic law. And if you're practicing in a domestic side, you need to be quite aware of the relevant law in that particular country.
Right. Uh, One Picasso, a very interesting username. He has asked, have events like IPL and disputes relating to it created any awareness for a robust sports law in India?
I will say definitely yes, because before IPL came in, the way the club matches were not so popular when it comes to, and also the money involved is extremely high when it comes to IPL. So, including not just the money which is given to the players, the money which is given to the management, the administrative cost, the broadcasting cost, that various expenses are incredibly high. So as and when the money which is involved is high, accordingly the law also needs to be developed a lot, and it has definitely come in. Consider there are a lot more endorsement deals signed by many more players now. So consider some international brand comes and endorses an Indian player. Of course, the relevant Indian lawyer who is going to negotiate that deal will have to be aware of the law, right? So there'll be a lot more people who are coming into the field of sports law, and definitely the awareness has increased.
Right, right, right. A lot of people are asking, where do we study sports law from? So, guys, in India, I don't think we have a university like that wherein you can go ahead and study sports law. But as Deepak was rightly pointing out, how universities abroad have their own pedagogy wherein they include sports law as a subject. So of course, LLM, and then there's a very interesting thing which he pointed out: the overlap between legal education and sports management when it comes to sports law. So management is something which you can also think of, especially if you are interested in sports law. So Deepak, one other thing which I wanted to clarify, a few articles which I read when it comes to sports law, they were saying that administration and facilitation of ideas, disputes, all of it will be included in sports law. So you should have an innate ability to manage people, manage sports personalities, and administer their assets, their everything related to it, and only then you'll be able to do well in sports law. So that ways, I think education of management becomes really relevant if come to think of it. I'm just thinking aloud.
Yes, definitely. As I said, there's a big overlap when it comes to management and law. So as and when you manage a player, managing a player will basically know what deal you need to sign, what time that you need to see. I've see for having someone who has done some endorsement contracts. The endorsement contracts are extremely complicated and too detailed. I mean, it will even come to the matter of seconds in which a player will actually endorse this particular brand, in which forum, social media, or how many days, a month, a year you need to spend time for this particular brand. So much of details is there available in that contract. So definitely when managing a player as well, you need to know about the relevant law. And also, just to little more add on answering that question, as I said, law is just not about doing your LLB and studying there. Even after you graduate from LLB, you still keep on studying. So even probably in India, you do not have that much of sports law related courses. Of course, you can join or do internships during your course as well. There are many sports law firms in India. You can just Google them, you will get sports law firms there. And you can go and join the relevant sports law firm, or you can go try an internship or as an in-house counsel in a sports brand. Or consider Nike, Adidas will have their own legal counsel. Decathlon has its legal counsel. Or you can go try to get a legal consultant post in NADA, National Anti-Doping Agency, in the government, in the ministry. Or if you want, you can take up the role of case counsel, case management counsel in Court of Arbitration of Sport in Switzerland. Some opportunities are there as well. So the fields are varied. You have a lot of opportunity. If you are not restricted to just one place, you can pretty much take up. There are a lot of sports law related work that is out there that you can go and grab. So definitely, it's not just about studying law during your LLB. Even after you do, you can still go learn somewhere, or during your LLB, instead of studying it in the college, you can join a law firm and study.
Right, right. Vatsalya asks, how different is sports law from contracts law? Rather, what makes sports law more unique?
Mhm. Quite interesting question. So it's a little more unique because you need to know practically what the sports law involves. As I said, this endorsement deals or a sponsorship deal of a player. You need to know these do not usually form part and parcel of each and every contract that you sign. It's completely different when it comes to two different contracts. So you need to be practically aware as to what is needed for your client, being either a sports player or an sports association or a sports company. What is actually required, which is extremely difficult. I actually see a slightly more overlap between media and broadcasting laws and sports field. probably involving the same rather than usual any other contract in sports. Definitely it's different, and sports you need it's little more unique, and you need to know what you need to put in there and what not.
Right. Vaibhav is asking, sir, please tell me some major criteria through which you got admission in Queen's University. Vaibhav, and there's this another user, Doctor. So both of you guys, please refer to the video. You will definitely find it. We have already covered it. Deepak has already spoken about how he got through Queen Mary University. Zain asks, what part does the board of a sports club play in the functioning of the club, and how are sports lawyers related to it?
Board of a sports club might not be the right terminology in
Yeah,
every
yeah, yeah.
a sports
Yeah.
club might be a company which will probably involve directors. If it's probably an organization, then it will have its own board.
Right.
So consider if it's BCCA, then you have a board. It has a committee. It has a president, secretary, committee members.
Right.
But when it comes to clubs, consider it's Chennai Super Kings or Royal Challengers Cup. You need to go into their contract. The name might be Chennai Super Kings or Royal Challengers Bangalore or Mumbai Indians, but still the company which actually is in charge of the particular team will probably be a private limited company or something like that. So you need to go, and when it what was the question again? Board of
What part does the board of a sports club play? Basically, the the club or the board which is entrusted with managing the entire club. Yeah.
not too law related, but you
Right.
need to be in charge of the administration side and management side,
Management side.
yeah, of the sports players, as well as probably in the competition that you need to consider. If it's IPL, it's not about just probably having Dhoni or Kohli in your team, but it also involves being part of BCCI, having a cricket match. You're part of cricket rather than you having your own player and you're doing a club match. It's you're part of BCCI, you're part of the cricket tournament which is happening. So you need to be quite aware of the sport as well, not just the players, and what and all you need to do and not for the sport in general. So that also should be taken into mind.
Right. Uh, a couple of more questions. Weber, sir, please tell most of the students in their starting faces problem of what type of career should they prefer in law. Please tell how to decide you have to make a career, and how do you decide that you wanted to make a career in sports law. So again, Weber, we have already covered it. Please hear the entire interview carefully. We have already covered your question, as in how did Deepak landed up in sports. All of it has already been covered in this session. Satej asked which country is better for LLM for Indian students. So Satej, that totally depends on your interest and your set of abilities and what you really want to do with your life. It could be any country, it really doesn't matter. But then, of course, your profile, where you want to work, all of that is important. So it's not a specific country which will be better, but it's just that it will totally depend on how you have panned out or you have fared in your career. Which
Totally.
field has more? Yeah, which field has more scope in India? Civil law or sports law? So, Sai Prasad, civil law is a broad area. It's not a niche area like sports. So it would contain a few contractual disputes which could be related to sports law. So it's the wrong difference which you want to understand. So both of them are slightly different when it comes to their scopes. All right. Any other question? Any interesting question which you guys want to? My God. Speaking of sports law, there are a lot of sports cars which have been hovering around my window since morning. Right. Any other question which you guys want to ask? Yes. Do sports lawyers earn good amount of money?
They do.
Ultimately, it boils down to that.
One word answer: they do. As long as you do well in your field, of course you
Right.
can earn a lot of money. So
Right. Right.
if you're not doing too well, then of course you'll be like most lawyers in India. We are going to be a little more difficult. Of course.
Right. Right. Does your expectations meets reality regarding sports law? Interesting.
No, to be very honest. So the fact is that it's not just about having being probably during the course. Probably you establish your practice really well and you represent the top tier clients. Your reality will definitely meet your expectation. But probably I myself I'm not too old, so I'm still in my early stages. 10 years is nothing for a law practitioner. So probably I have definitely done some for consider just without naming someone. I myself, as I said, I'm a badminton player. So I had actually done a sports deal for some world number one badminton player. So which is of course the reality meeting the expectation. So of course it will definitely grow as and when you do. But many of the problems or disputes or deals are a little more on the smaller scale. And so it'll all of course depend where you're put up and how lucky you are to land which case or which dispute, which deal. So.
Right. Superb. So I think we have addressed more or less everyone's questions. If in case you have any other questions, please write to me. I'll forward it to Deepak and try and chase him for the answer. It was very lovely and very intellectually stimulating just to understand how sports law functions in the country. What exactly are the things which are required for you to become a decent sports lawyer? Also, the way you explained in detail, it really, I think, is of tremendous use when it comes to, taking transition from a normal degree to a field of law. So that question was also one of the most asked questions, which people who want to do their graduation after doing a graduation in a specific field usually asks us. So we would like to thank you from the bottom of our heart, Deepak. Thank you so much for coming to the session, bracing us with so many important and relevant information related to sports law. And thank you for answering all the students' questions. So it was a pleasure.
Pleasure was all mine. I'm extremely thankful again for having me here in this field, and I commend you for this excellent initiative that you're taking. Having because having someone who's practicing, definitely giving a lecture will further throw light on the practical experience, practical side of law. And of course, I also definitely want to wish the best of luck for all the students who saw the lecture and who want to pursue law. And the please definitely go ahead, do law. No second thoughts about it. It's an excellent field. Uh, the, there are many buses, and it's high time you catch a bus and go to the relevant right place. So,
Right,
please
right.
do.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for joining us. We will see you soon in the next episode. Take care. Keep on practicing hard. Keep on working hard on your dreams. Bye.